Thanks for joining us. I'm Lorelei Shamayo. We have Metaphysical Empowerment and Wellness events. We have both Night of Messages and we have fairs. And so we interview the practitioners and vendors that we have at our events, so you get a chance to know who we are before you join us at an event. So here today, I'm interviewing Tony White. So Tony, please tell us a little about who you are and what you share at our events.
Oh, hi. My name's Tony White. As you can hear, I'm not from this country. I'm from the UK. And the weird thing is that most of my life I've been a traditional hand-drawn animator, but it's only been in the last year that I've really started to reach out and give back a lot of the things that have been given to me spiritually and psychologically and all the other things over the years. I essentially do, my two most successful things are doing personal readings at the various fairs. But also I'll show you, I also do a thing for parents. I think you can see that. It's called My Star Child. And basically, let me get to it. It's a printed report. So what I do is I kind of do a very fancy, using my art skills, I do a fancy birth chart for a child. And that's accompanied by this 20-page report about what the child's inner nature is like. Their potentials and their challenges later in life. And I also do an intuitive letter from the spirit of the child to the parent to say, these are the three most important things you need to know about me. And I think those things will help parents, especially of very young born children, to understand their child and to maybe bring them up as an individual in their own right, rather than just do the bland, stereotypical way of bringing a child up. Each child, each one of us has its own essence. So they're the main two things I do, but I also do crazy things. I created a series of cards. I call them astrological oracle cards, but they actually began, using my artistic skills, they actually began as flashcards for teaching astrology. And I would say, okay, there's 120 of them. Each one represents a particular planet in a particular sign of the zodiac. And I'll say to a student, understand what the meaning of the card is, put it in your pocket and walk around with it for a day and see that unfolding around you, because you will. You'll see the principles of that planet and sign unfolding. And then the next day do another card, next day do another card. But then my wife came up to me, and she's much more intuitive than I am in many ways. And she said, I wonder if they work like tarot cards. I wonder if you can do readings with them. So she proceeded to start doing readings with them, which is something I never expected they'd ever do. And then that grew beyond there. We printed one set, a prototype pack, and started using them around the fair and everything like that, showing them to people. And then tarot readers said, can we buy a pack of those? They're very cool. And so I went into debt on my credit card and actually printed some, and we started selling them. And then the readers came back to us and said, can you write a book about it? And can you tell us more about the card? And so I ended up writing this book called The Astrological Oracle Cards. So that and the other thing I did was write an introduction to astrology called The Secret Life of Stars. And it's full of fun. It's actually serious information, but I actually use fun designs and everything to make it light, to make you smile while you're learning. So in a nutshell, which is not a nutshell, that's what I do. So I've got my table, if you visit me, my table is a big mixture. But as I say, primarily I sit down and do a reading. And my readings, I don't do fortune telling. I don't do prediction. What I do is help people understand themselves better. This developed from when I was a young teenage kid, and I had a terrible childhood, nothing to do with my parents, but my inner self was at stress and everything. I would have nightmares every night, wake up screaming. I would be I was under a child counselor for 2 years. I would have illnesses that doctors couldn't seem to fix and everything. And it got to the point where I couldn't even go to school. I couldn't go out my front door every day. And nobody seemed to be able to fix me up until my mother introduced me to an herbalist astrologer. And he actually saved my mother's life when doctors had given up on her. And as a result of that, she said, well, why don't you go and see him? He might be able to help you. And to cut this very long story short, in 30 minutes, he explained my birth chart to me. and all the lights came alive in my head, and I suddenly understood myself for the first time. And that was a huge transition moment in my life. And from that moment of not being able to go outside my front door to school, I ended up traveling the world. I've climbed the Great Pyramid. I've lectured in China. I've been all over the place. And here I am in Seattle, living and working and being crazy.
Well, so what does a reading typically look like at a fair?
Okay, so it's a 30-minute read. What I do is I do a 30-minute reading, and but then I follow up. I take the email address of the person and I follow up and send them more or less a 20-page digital report, so they get much more information out of it. But I really start, and if people don't know what a chart looks like, this is what an astrological chart looks like. And most people, unless you know what it is, it's just gobbledygook. You know, nobody understands what it's about. So I spend the first part of it explaining, you know, about the planets, the zodiac, the houses, these pizza slice shapes around there, they're called houses, and those squiggly cobweb things in the middle, they're called aspects. And I start explaining to people what they individually mean, what is it all about, and they'll begin to understand how a chart works. And then as we talk, we begin to dialogue, and then I home in onto specific things about them. And usually 9 times out of 10, I get responses that then opens up where we go with it. And it's usually, you know, you can tell if somebody is in need of a certain area in their life, they can't work out something, then we'll focus up much more clearly on that. Or I'll just keep going until we get that spark moment where we start interacting and more comes out that can help them.
Yeah.
You know, and because I believe, you know, if you understand yourself better, you make much better life choices, you know. And it's getting somebody to understand themselves better. That's the purpose of what I do.
Definitely. When you do private readings, do they typically go longer? Do they go deeper? Or do you typically work in 30-minute formats?
Yeah, I tend to mainly do meetings at fairs and things like that. I don't do too many private readings simply because I don't have time. You can see with all the books and things I do, I spend so much of my free time working on those things. And of course, if the phone rings or if I get an email and said, can you help me? Of course I will. Excuse me. I tend to call myself the Starbucks astrologer because I end up meeting people in their nearest Starbucks and we just sit down. So, and yes, that will go on for longer. I mean, I usually have to charge more. Everything I do at the fairs, I reduce my prices. Including the books. I do a discount on the books and the cards and everything else, and on the readings too. But if I meet someone, then I have to do a slightly higher rate to compensate me for the traveling and time and everything.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And how did you first get interested in astrology?
Well, as I said, it was really it was the herbalist astrologer who was the most amazing man. He was almost like, he was totally my spiritual teacher, my second grandfather, third grandfather, an uncle, a friend, everything. But in treating my mom, he basically, the first time she ever went in to see him, she started to say what was wrong with her, and she was really, really sick. And he said, no, don't tell me what's wrong with you. I'll tell you. Just give me your time, date, and place of birth. And with that, he wrote down on things. And then what she told me afterwards, because she was the only one who went in there, she told me afterwards that he started saying, well, at the age of 17, you had this medical condition, didn't you? And then at 23, you had to have this surgery, and then so on and so on. And he went through a whole entire medical history, things that she'd forgotten, to even including what she'd come to see him about that time. And she said to me, once she heard all this, she said, this man knows my body better than I do. I am totally in his hands. And basically he said, it'll take me 18 months. I can't replace what's gone, but I can arrest what's bad and what's getting worse. And I can build on that. And in 18 months from when she went in there, she could barely eat a spoon of mashed potato, if that. And the rest of it was drugs and supplements that kept her alive. At the end of it, in 18 months, she went on a full diet of anything she wanted within moderation. And at the age of 56, she went out to get a job for the first time in 20 years. Now, when I saw that, I said, I've got to know what this man knows. So I asked him, I said, how did you do that? And will you teach me it? and he explained it was astrology. He never did charts or horoscopes for anything. He just did it for medical reasons and diagnosis and treatment reasons. And then he said, yes, I'll treat you. I'll teach you. And basically, I used to go and sit between patients every Saturday afternoon. And for about 3 years, and he taught me everything I know.
Wow.
But in terms of my career, my animation career, I pretty much was in the closet with astrology because most people don't understand it. And I was nervous at what they'd say about me doing it. So I never mentioned it. But a year ago, I said, that's got to end now. I don't care what people think of me. I know what the value is. And it's been so valuable to me that I now want to give back to other people.
Yeah. So it just are more books and things like that emerging from you right now? I just imagine that there's,
Yeah. Interesting thing is I'm actually publishing a book that isn't mine right now. I'm getting the proofs on Friday. I'm very excited about it. It's called The Lindisfarne Talisman. It was written by a friend of mine who passed away about 2 years ago. And if ever there was a human Merlin, the magician, he was Merlin. He was in the north of England. He had the beard. He was just an amazing, wise man. But he wrote this wonderful story, which is like a mystical adventure in time and space. And we tried everything to get it published, and we could never get it published in his lifetime. And I came across the manuscript recently, and I said, I've got to publish that. So I'm self-publishing it for him. So that's my next project, which is pretty much resolved now. But personally, I'm writing one more book, which is, it's going to be called Death, Recollections in the Exit Line. And it's basically from a part of my fears as a child was about death. I was terrified. I had no reason to be terrified because nobody in my family had died. Nobody close to me had died. But even from an infant, I had this terrible obsessive fear of death. And that went on until I met that herbalist. And apart from teaching me, he actually talked to me about that. And he said, the only way to overcome your fear of death is to study it and find out more things about it. And so I just did that with a vengeance. And throughout my life, I've come across these amazing personal experiences and things I've learned, completely lost the fear of it.
Wow.
Slightly concerned how I'm going to die, but that's the only other thing. But I'm actually completely over the fear of it. But I've had really from psychic to non-psychic experiences to all kinds of things. You know, when you stand in the tombs of the Valley of Kings and you see how the Egyptians approach death, there's a lesson to learn there, but it's not the only lesson. There are many, many ways of approaching death. But I just felt that as I got over my fears, other people need to get over their fears too. It shouldn't be the taboo subject it is now.
Yeah, so makes sense. We have such a need there.
Yeah.
Well, how can people find more about you online?
Okay, so the best way to reach me is to go to my primary website, which is startoons.com. That's STARTOONZ.com. And at the back, there's a contact page, and just send me a note and a message, and I'll be able to get through. And you'll also see the other things, including a link to the My Star Child website. But if they start with startoons.com, they'll be able to reach me. And of course, at the fairs, of course.
Exactly.
Which is the best way. When you're one-on-one, face-to-face with a person, that's easily the best way of working.
It's lovely too, right? Just to have a selection of all different kinds of people. So we really find the great fit.
Yeah.
Do you, and so some customers come in with their kids, some bring information about their children. And then I see you work with adults also.
Yep.
Right, so you work with lots of different people. It's great.
Great. The ones with the kids are slightly different because sometimes they'll bring me a newborn child who's been born, 2 months, 3 months. But they're the most interesting ones because although I don't believe in fate and absolute fate that people are controlled, I believe totally we have free will and free choice. But there are tendencies and there are things that are within our birth charts that are tremendous potentials that if we follow them, we can get much more enrichment. But there are also challenges in our life. We all have them. And there are challenges we have to learn from. Well, it's wonderful if a parent knows what their child's challenges are going to be, as well as their potentials. And at the formative years, which is from birth through to pretty much all the preschool years, that's the formative years. But they're the years that most parents don't know enough about their children. They just see the surface child, but they don't know the real child that's going to emerge and grow like a plant. It's going to grow from that child. And I like to think that my reports can help them understand that.
Mm-hmm. Right, so help give them a lot of insight when they aren't able to communicate and share as well, and their children don't even know who they are so much yet.
Exactly, exactly. And I didn't till my chart was explained to me, and it totally transformed my life. It was just, because I used to think, oh, so I do that, but what you're saying is because of this, if I did that, I'd get a different outcome. And tried it, and of course it did, and I saw the wisdom of astrology. And astrology isn't what everyone thinks it is, or most people think it's either just craziness or it's just crystal ball gazing and things. And the last thing, true astrology is very scientific. You have you see elements in the chart, and over centuries people observed results and suggestions of what's going to happen, not happen in the life, but potentials in the life, or tendencies in the life that a person can either be subject to, or they can be in control of, or even fully grasp, for their own benefits. And astrology is like that. Intuition does sneak in at the end when you've done enough things. You see things and patterns and things, and you pop in intuition. But it's none of those things, and that's why I love it, because it's so factual and scientific.
Yep. Oh, that's great. I understand that tension and coming from a different direction.
With your science background,
mm-hmm. No, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Tony. It's been lovely chatting with you. And then for those of you listening and watching, come see us at the Metaphysical Empowerment and Wellness events. We're online at MetaphysicalEmpowermentEvents.com. We have events in Seattle, Portland, Salem, and Eugene. We look forward to seeing you.